Good morning and welcome to Crack the Mic podcast with Agent of Change DeCorey Davis. And this week's segment is entitled Gun Violence in America, Part 2. The issue, gun violence in America in recent years, have become so pervasive in our country that it has sparked controversy on both sides of the political aisle. In fact, whether you are a proponent of either more restrictions or bans, the fact of the matter is this: most American cities recently have become more like a war zone. And to help me further this discussion, I have a distinguished panel that includes, representing the Miami-Dade County Mayor's Office, Mr. Jason Smith, Director of Equity for the Honorable Daniela Levine Cava's administration; Reverend Andre Green, board member for PACT, a social justice organization who's been fighting for justice in Miami-Dade County for over 30 years; former prosecutor with the Miami-Dade County State Attorney's Office and managing partner with the Hager Law Firm, who's recovered over $250 million in verdicts and settlement, Attorney Douglas J. McCarran. And last but certainly not least, Dr. Reverend Keon S. Payton, President and Chairman of the Institute of Trauma and Economic Justice. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Good morning.
On last week, we left off with the question, in your opinion, what is the main ideal of the burden of firearm violence in the United States? And Mr. Attorney McCarran had some great things to share, great sentiment to share on that question. You want to go ahead and continue your sentiment, Mr. McCormick?
As I said, I thought I might have got a little bit far afield from what the question was in terms of what might be the biggest burden. But one of the things is, I think that what I was discussing is that, we need to start caring about people that we might not identify as or with, and start caring about people that are victims of crime, and and understanding that most communities, it's a very small percentage of the people that are creating the problem, where you have 99.9% of the people are law-abiding or just trying to live their life and trying to stay out of harm's way. And we have to look to those folks, but we also have to help them. We have to help them make a safer community, and we have to help them, figure out ways to get these people that are actually committing the crimes to stop. And we're not going to do that by just pointing fingers and saying this or that. We have to actually take action, and we're going to have to get involved. And I know, like these gentlemen on the panel do on a daily basis. And I don't want to keep repeating myself, so I wanted to give it to the rest of the panel, because I would love to hear their sentiments on this very important issue.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing your sentiment, Attorney. You want to go ahead and share your thoughts, Dr. Payton?
Absolutely. Well, I certainly, again, thank you, Brother Davis, for this very kind and generous invitation for us to come and to share in a topic that is so critically important for our nation and for all of our respective communities in this very, very dark time period in which we are currently facing. I could not agree more with many of the sentiments that Attorney McCarran was expressing last week, and he a little bit reiterated some of that in the conversation here. But what really struck me in his last conversation was the term sin that was used in reference to his point of view for some of the actions that are transpiring. I feel personally that in the aftermath of trauma and violence, there's a lot of pain, there's a lot of hurt, and hurt people hurt people. And certainly with my expertise in adverse childhood experiences, which we now know is the root cause of so much of the violence and devastation that we're seeing in many of our communities, I feel that if we're going to find a forward path to healing for our communities and for our nation, we're going to have to reckon with our traumatic past. And the
Absolutely.
reality is, the founding of our nation is such that it was founded upon violence, whether it was the taking of land or the taking of lives for land. We have not been our brother's keeper. And I think that if we're going to find a forward path, we're going to have to lead with empathy and really understanding better what's happening in these communities that have been systemically and structurally impoverished over the years. Our criminal justice system, which has done more harm than good in rehabilitating our incarcerated citizens. We have not allocated our resources in ways that have been most constructive to addressing some of the root causes. I think that in our last conversation, we talked a lot about reinvestment in people. And really, I think that reinvestment in people is reinvestment in positive experiences, which we also know is now a technical term that is being used to counter the adversity that so many of our citizens are experiencing here in America. And so I commend the Miami-Dade County for the efforts that Brother Green has led in his leadership over the past 30 years, much of which Brother Smith has alluded to that has been incorporated in the current administration with their Peace and Prosperity Initiative. I think we need to see more of those types of investments, more of those investments, not just in programs, but really investments in people, so that when we understand that the root cause is adverse childhood experiences, how do we begin to put people on a forward path where, one, they can become more self-aware as to how their adversity has impacted them, and then provide them with the types of programs and services that will prevent the types of atrocities that we're now seeing as a result of these untreated traumas that are impacting so many of our communities across the country.
Absolutely. I definitely echo that sentiment. You want to go ahead and share your thoughts on the question, Mr. Smith?
Yes, certainly. I just want to follow up on what was just said, especially about the need to create positive experiences as a way to address those the trauma that the youth in our society is experiencing. And I want to highlight two programs that have emanated from the Peace and Prosperity Plan that was put into place by Mayor Daniela Levine Cava, as well as the Miami-Dade Board of County Commissioners. One is the Fit to Lead program. Now, this Fit to Lead program is a program that takes youth and gives them paid jobs at our parks.
Oh, wow.
And not only do they have paid jobs at the parks, but they get experiences. They get to go to different places on different field trips and different leadership exercises, so that they can have a positive experience, learn some leadership skills, and then get paid. And because of some investments that we had through philanthropic partners, as well as from the business community, this summer in 2023, it will be the largest Fit to Lead program that we've ever had in Miami-Dade County. I mean, we're talking about hundreds of youth in Miami-Dade County who will have this opportunity.
Wow, powerful.
Yeah, very, very powerful, to really address that. And I'll just stop there. I think I had another program in mind as well, but I'll just stop there and get to just speak to the hope that is there, that can emanate from community-based organizations, partnering with government, partnering with philanthropic organizations, partnering with our law enforcement agencies, and everybody coming together to address the root causes of gun violence. And in order to do that, you have to address the whole child, the whole family, the whole community.
Absolutely. I definitely agree with you on that, Mr. Smith. You want to go ahead, Reverend Green, and share your thoughts, sir?
Yes, I agree with all the gentlemen here. And I think one of the main burdens of, firearm violence in the United States it's put pressure on our mental health issues.
Absolutely.
I think that the pressures of society coming out of COVID and just all the things, economics, housing, all those things have really raised up the mental health issues in this country. And I think a lot of the gun violence, along with the adverse trauma, has just come to a head,
Absolutely.
and I think that really we need to put more effort in our health system dealing with mental health. I think communities of color, I think that we don't realize there's a lot of mental health issues. Even,
Absolutely.
it's just, I look at it almost like a functional alcoholic. They're functional and they can do different things, but there's issues there,
Right,
that
right.
keep them from doing what is called critical thinking, you
Mhm,
know,
mhm.
not able to, rationalize certain situations because when they're confronted and they're under pressure, it's like a pipe, pressure will break a pipe. And
Absolutely.
pretty much in these communities of color, they've been under pressure for 400 years, pretty much.
Maybe even longer.
So, and then looking at what's happening in society,
Mhm,
last 50 years, it's almost like a lot of us are trying to reverse from when my grandparents or my parents were fighting, for civil rights and social justice.
mhm.
People were just trying to turn back things. It's just a lot of pressure. You got social media. It's a lot going on, in
Absolutely.
society that is putting a burden. And firearms is just the fire. It's the match to just
Mm.
light because it gives people an outlet. And then there's so much insensitivity because of social media. When we were coming up, we didn't have all that social media stuff. You know,
Mhm.
it's right now. I have to think about remembering my mother's phone number because all you gotta do is press a button. Now, at this time, I can remember everybody's phone number. You had to dial a little
Right.
thing, goes back, so there's a lot going on. And I think a lot of it has to do with the mental health situation in society,
Mhm.
which is a stimulus of everything along with economics and education.
I couldn't agree with you more. Now, I just want to change the tides for a minute. Now, the Second Amendment ratified in 1791, proposed by James Madison, was to allow the creation of civilians forces that counteract a tyrannical federal government, the British monarchy. But fast forward 232 years later, that right afforded to many by the Constitution has become, in my view, a gift and a curse. Because while the number one cause of premature deaths in the US is due to gun violence, it's because at least 1,000 people die each day in the United States. Yet the US is awash in firearms. Now, I know, Reverend Green, you are a big advocate for the right to carry. So I want to ask you this here question. What can lawmakers, in your view, do to protect the Second Amendment right, meanwhile maintaining the safety of all of its citizens?
Wow, that's a hard question. Let's start off with understanding what the Second Amendment actually says. And I wrote it down here. So, well-regulated militia being
Absolutely.
necessary to the security of a free state, the right
Right.
of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
Mm-hmm.
In 2008, the Supreme Court kind of changed the ruling on the militia because they see that we now have an army, because the primary reason
Mm-hmm.
for passing of the Second Amendment was to prevent the need of the United States of having a professional army, you
Right.
know. But then on the second side of that, guns are a necessary tool in a violent world, you
Right.
know. So you're kind of caught between the rock and the hard place. I think that the governor of California was talking about us forming a 28th Amendment. In my personal opinion, I am a gun owner, registered gun owner. And I think that there should be the same way that we get driver's license. I think you need to get a license. You should have a license to have a gun. I think there should be a certain amount of training and education. I think that if you're not in the military, there's no need to own an assault weapon. There's no way that we can take them all back now, you know.
Mhm.
But I think that you should be 21 years old. I think people should there should be an extensive universal background check. I think there should be an extensive wait period or cooling off period before a person gets a gun, because a lot of times a person want to get a gun within that minute, they're heated. But if you give them a little period of time or maybe forethought, stuff like that, the violence may not happen. I think that we can't eradicate guns out of society, because basically, you know, it's kind of, you know, arming your citizens is a last resort against tyranny. You know, we're one of the only few countries, like just think in Haiti, if all those people had guns, those gangs wouldn't be able to do what they're doing over in Haiti, because everybody be armed and neighborhoods
Mhm.
can form a militia or something and fight against that. But a lot of countries, you know, so it's kind of a catch-22 situation. You know, a lot of these countries, the only people in other countries outside the United States that have weapons is the military or gangs. Most of the civilians, they don't have guns. What we do here, because it's kind of a guarantee against, I guess, tyranny, as they would say, it's the last resort. So that's my take on it. I think that, you know, there should be, you know, someone with mental health or who's been beating on women and those type of things shouldn't have access to guns. And, you know, that's pretty much it. You know, I feel.
And I think you provided a great response to that question. And I'll just have you know that, listen, our beloved Republican Party is definitely all of the things that you have named, the waiting period, the mental health check, and all those things were led by Governor Rick Scott, and immediately following the incident that took place with the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas shooting. He implemented red flag laws, and it was met, suffice it to say, it was met with a lot of intrepidation by a lot of the Democrats. But I digress. You want to go ahead and share your thoughts on that question, Mr. Smith?
Well, no. I mean, you know, in Miami-Dade County, you know, we can only address, you know, the root causes of gun violence and, you know, our youth picking up guns and trying to take illegal guns off of the streets.
Right.
And, you know, these questions about, like you rightly said, the questions about policy regarding the Second Amendment, that is a state issue.
It is.
And our state legislature has reserved unto itself the right to pass laws regarding that. So local officials cannot pass laws regarding you know, gun ownership and registration. That is the province of our state legislature.
Absolutely. And they indeed did do their job. Going back with Governor Rick Scott, and I just want to say that Governor DeSantis is definitely, he has taken the mantle from Governor Scott, and he's definitely ran with it, and he's running well. You want to go ahead and share your thoughts on that question, Dr. Payton?
Well, I don't want to get into the political divisiveness of parties, but I feel that there are a number of things that are transpiring that is exacerbating mental illness that could be better addressed, particularly in the state of Florida. Some things, particularly that the governor there is doing that is undermining democracy, in my opinion, and is causing a lot of pain, particularly for African Americans and others who are suffering from identity crises that often causes exacerbated mental illness. But with respect to the question, I think that Brother Green answered the question well, as did Brother Smith. But I agree, or particularly with what Brother Green mentioned, with respect to just understanding that I lost my thought. I have some guests in my home, but I was just thinking about what Brother Green had mentioned with respect to uh, the reality that we're living in a violent world,
Mhm.
and people should be able to protect themselves. People should have the right to protect themselves and their families. And so I think that it is a very difficult challenge. You're not going to remove the guns off the street. There's a lot, as you have mentioned, Dr. Davis. America is awashed with guns, right, on our streets, and so
Right.
we're not going to fix that problem overnight. And people should have the right to protect themselves and their families. Now, I do feel that there is opportunity for common sense legislation. And I think that may vary based upon states. I don't think that it ought to be a broad federal stroke, particularly because there are certain cultures where youth and young people are safely trained and are using guns for purposes that help their livelihood. Whereas in places like Detroit, where I'm in a suburb of, our young people don't have that reality. They're using their guns for violence. So I think it is a state issue, and the states should be responsible, as Brother Smith alluded to ensure that they understand the dynamics of what's happening in their states,
Mhm.
and not just in the urban centers, but also in their rural communities, so that as we have a conversation that needs to be bipartisan legislation, that we
Mhm.
can address it from a standpoint that makes sense for everyone, and also is going to ensure that our communities are remaining safe.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. All right, we're going to go ahead and take a commercial break. Um, we'll be right back.
Me and old Hal have been together for a long time. Recently, I realized that I could use some help with basic everyday tasks, but Hal depends on me, and I'm not going to leave him. I don't have to. Yes, that was good news, wasn't it, Hal?
Immaculate Home Health Care can give you the help you need so you can stay safely and comfortably at home from a few hours a day to round the clock. Call today for your consultation. 561-372-9108. 561-372-9108. Online at ImmaculateHHC.com.
We want to thank our sponsors. Okay, but let's get back into the discussion if we may. Mr. Attorney McCaughrean, you want to go ahead and share your sentiment on that question, sir?
On the in the Second Amendment question,
Yes.
yeah, I kind of agree with what Mr. Green had to say. I think reasonable, responsible legislation is important, especially with firearms. I do not and never have understood why somebody can have a firearm without anywhere in the country without having to do some type of test or to get some education to make sure that they qualified to use a firearm. I mean, you need a driver, you need to get a driver's license to drive a car. I never could understand it. Florida does have some reasonable regulations in place, like I think the others. I'm not opposed to people having handguns. I understand, and also people that are hunters. I get it. I'm not saying ban all firearms, but I think assault rifles are a different story. I just don't see the need for anybody outside the military or law enforcement to have them. People that argue against or with me about that tell me, well, it's fun. We like to go shooting. Well, there's a lot of things that might be fun that are not legal, or people that might think that they're fun, or a certain activity is fun that's not legal. So I just think that we have to be reasonable about it. We have to make sure that we try to keep guns out of the hands of people with mental health episodes or issues that are going on, because I think, as we've seen over the years with the reoccurrence of mass shootings over and over again, a common theme that we hear is that the assailant is either has mental health issues or suffering from a mental health episode, and I think we've talked about that earlier. I think that's a pandemic, and the gun violence in terms of mass shootings especially is a pandemic as to what's going on
Absolutely.
in our country, and we need to get serious about it. And you hear it all the time, the thoughts and prayers, and I get upset every time I hear it, because that thoughts and prayers aren't going to do anything to protect the next victims. And we need to get serious about it. And one of the things that we can do is get rid of the assault rifles.
Okay, I definitely echo that sentiment. I do believe that it should be strictly restricted to military personnel and not in the hands of any regular civilians. Okay. All right. So let's just go ahead and change the tides for a moment, if we may. And I want to ask this final question to the panel. In your view, what can lawmakers do to prevent further occurrences of mass shootings in our schools? You want to go ahead and share your thoughts on that, Dr. Payton?
Well, I think that we recognize that mental illness is very pervasive, and certainly coming out of this pandemic, the isolation that the pandemic caused, the lack of socialization, there are a number of diverse challenges that have been imposed upon our youth and young adults. And I feel that what legislators may be able to do is provide greater resources to schools to not only ensure that our school perimeters are safe, so that persons can't easily come into schools with weapons, etc. But I also think that just providing programs and services that help to support the mental wellness and well-being of our students, and be able to identify when students may be having challenges. But I don't think it's a conversation that I think lawmakers need to have with educators to develop those types of parameters that will help to safeguard our youth and children in these schools. I'm here in Oakland County, Michigan, where we are still healing from the mass shooting of Oxford High School. And we now know that there were a number of signs that the perpetrator had demonstrated, signaling that he was suffering from some level of mental illness. There were educators who were made aware of some of those signs, and they were ignored. And so I think that the more we converse about these types of early signs, it ought to be able to put us into conversation about what we can do to identify those types of red flags and get those students the type of help and support services that they need.
Powerful, Dr. Payton. I definitely agree with you. Early prevention in those type of situations is absolutely key. All right. You want to go ahead and share your thoughts on that, Reverend Green?
Yes, I agree with Dr. Payton. I think one of the programs that should be implemented, believe it or not, is that I am my brother's keeper. You know, I think that in schools, they should have like a little box or something where that anonymously you could maybe, if you see something or you expect something that's going on, that you put it in there, and maybe the school counselors or something like that, they look into it. Not so much because people can use it and weaponize it, but, you know, not so much as that, but to kind of, you know, have those kind of resources where people can speak out anonymously about things that issues that they see.
Right.
The second thing I think too is that, you know, I'm from Akron, Ohio, and I went back a few weeks ago. Actually, my high school won the state basketball championship. It's a public school. That's kind of unheard of these days. Now, most of the private schools are winning them. But I went in there, and they had a metal detector as you walk in the building, and it just blew my mind that we've come to that point. But the only thing that you can do now is you're going to have a technical kind of military person probably come into a school and kind of look at the school situation, almost like in a military situation, and protect the school and look at different access points and things like that. I mean, it's crazy, but, you know, what are you going to do? Because it's hard to stop somebody with an idea and a gun that just walks in the building, and the building is a soft target, you know, and they go in there and do those kind of thing. You know, being, you know, you are your brother's keeper. People should be cognizant, just like, Dr. Payton said, that these people knew what was going on and stuff like that. So, that's pretty much it.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. And I do, I think that's, listen, I'm not opposed to schools having metal detectors. If we can protect our judges inside of our courthouses, why can't we protect our kids? You want to go ahead and share your thoughts on that, Mr. Attorney McCorrin?
Sure. I think in terms of, you can't believe the things that these children have to go through. They're doing active shooter training at early ages, and this is across the board at schools all throughout the country. And when we were kids, you never would have thought these things could happen, but we know that it continues to happen, and it will continue to happen until we start trying to change the way things are handled. And I think everybody has already discussed, the mental health issues that are prevalent. We need to try to get a hold of that. The assault weapons, they're always the weapon of choice, so to speak, in these mass shootings, it appears. I think, we have to do everything we can to protect our children. Your parents send the kids to school, and the last thing that they could ever imagine is getting a call that something's happening at the school. But I think, I know in Dade County, there's school resource officers. I think we just have to, I don't want to say that the only solution is to throw money at the problem, but I think that one of the things that we need to do is that we need to have enough funding so we can actually have police officers at the school and security assessments that are being done by professionals so we can keep the schools as safe as possible. I think that these are things that if they're not being done, they should be done. I can tell you, we deal with security experts throughout the country in our work. And I have a feeling that a lot of these security professionals would dedicate their time to do some, but obviously it's a giant job. I mean, there's so many schools throughout the country, so just the private sector is not going to do it. It's going to have to be our local law enforcement personnel that are trying to do these security assessments. But I think, I hate to say it, but metal detectors, police officers are something that I think that are mandated or necessary now because of what's been happening in our country. But again, we have to get to the root of the problem, and we're like Dr. Payton was discussing, we have to try to figure out why these things are happening and how we can prevent them from even the thought of them ever happening. I think that's the most important thing. And again, going back to what we've been discussing pretty much the whole time, it's the programs and getting to these kids early, and then also, looking for the red flags in terms of the mental health issues. And the people that are somehow getting these firearms. It's something that, we talk about it like it's something you can snap your fingers and do. I understand that it's a complex situation and it needs a lot of different minds, probably a whole lot of people smarter than I, that they're going to be able to fix it. But we have to start taking steps to get there. And conversations like this are unbelievable and they're awesome. But until we start getting the people that are making the decisions to actually understand what's necessary, and we're only going to be able to do that by voting people into office that are going to do the right thing by our children, and making sure that the priorities are straight. And in my opinion, the biggest priority in this country should be our children and their future.
Absolutely. Mr. Smith, you got the last word, sir.
Well, I think what Attorney McCarron said was absolutely right. So was Dr. Payton and everybody on the panel. Our children are our most important thing. And so, we all have to stand ready to support those officials, in the school boards who are going to make those tough decisions to keep our children safe. And it's going to take that intervention, prevention, and all the other aspects that Dr. Payton mentioned, including hardening of our schools to keep our children safe. That's the only thing
Absolutely. Well, unfortunately, we are out of time for this segment, Gun Violence in America, Part 2. I want to remind you to like and share this video and YouTube channel. Also, I want to thank my very distinguished panel that include representing the Miami-Dade County Mayor's Office, the Honorable Daniela Levine Cava's administration, Jason Smith. He is the Director of Equity there, and also managing partner with Hager Law Firm, who's recovered over $250 million in verdicts and settlements. Mr. Attorney Douglas J. McCarran, also founder and chairman for the Institute of Trauma and Economic Justice, Dr. Reverend Keon Payton, and also board member and steward at the Mount Hermon AME Church in Miami Gardens, Florida, Reverend Green. But before we leave, I'd like to leave you with this thought by Morgan Harper Nichols. Don't let anyone tell you that these bad things happen, then everyone goes back to normal. You don't have to be everyone. Stay with grief. Stay with the anger. Stay troubled by it all. Stay open-hearted to those who grieve. Stay tuned to those who are working on change. Again, this is your agent of change signing off with Crack the Mic. Peace.
At Immaculate Home Healthcare, we recognize the important role home plays in healthcare, which is why we are dedicated to helping you and your loved ones heal at home. Together, we work with you, your physician, and family to help make the transition from hospital or facility care to home care a smooth one. Our team of highly skilled health professionals includes nurses, therapists, aides, and medical social workers that have been chosen for their compassion and commitment to care. They undergo rigorous background checks to ensure that only the most dependable and trustworthy staff serve you. People turn to our home health care for help with services like post-surgical care, wound care, chronic disease management, diabetes, pain management, and hypertension. Home health care costs less than hospital or facility care, and Medicare pays 100% for qualified patients. At Immaculate Home Health Care, we provide quality medical care in the comfort of home. Call us today at 561-372-9108 to discuss qualifications and payment options, or visit us online at www.immaculateHHC.com. We'll be happy to help.